Hey guys, tonight we are descending into one of the ocean's most bewildering phenomena, where creatures living in absolute darkness somehow know exactly when the moon is full above the surface they will never see. You are floating 3 miles beneath the Pacific, surrounded by crushing pressure that would instantly flatten your body like a soda can, watching as tiny points of blue and green light begin to flicker around you in perfect synchronization. You definitely wouldn't survive this without your imaginary deep-sea vessel. But from this safe vantage point, you can witness something that has puzzled marine biologists for decades. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. I love seeing how this community spans across time zones. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drift deeper into the midnight zone where sunlight has never penetrated, yet around you countless organisms are preparing for what appears to be a carefully orchestrated light show. The water temperature hovers just above freezing, and the silence is broken only by the occasional click of your sonar and the distant groaning of tectonic plates shifting on the ocean floor. Here in this alien world, you begin to notice that the bioluminescent creatures are not randomly flashing their biological lanterns. Instead, they seem to be following some invisible conductor. The first clue comes from a cluster of deep-sea anglerfish, their lures glowing with an eerie blue light that pulses in a rhythm you cannot immediately identify. You watch as dozens of these prehistoric-looking predators begin to synchronize their displays, creating waves of light that ripple through the water column like some underwater aurora. The timing seems deliberate, almost ceremonial, and you realize you are witnessing something that happens on a schedule older than human civilization. Marine biologists first documented this phenomenon in the 1970s when deep-sea submersibles began venturing into the abyss with sophisticated cameras and timing equipment. What they discovered defied conventional understanding of how biological clocks work. These creatures living in perpetual darkness were somehow maintaining perfect synchronization with the lunar cycle occurring miles above their heads. The moon, invisible and seemingly irrelevant to their dark world, was apparently conducting their most important biological processes. You notice that the intensity of the light show corresponds exactly with the phase of the moon above the surface, even though no moonlight has reached these depths for millions of years. During new moon periods, the bioluminescent activity drops to barely detectable levels, but as the moon waxes toward full, the deep-sea creatures increase their luminous displays in perfect correlation. This suggests that whatever mechanism they use to track lunar cycles is not dependent on light penetration, but on something far more subtle and mysterious. Researchers still argue about whether this lunar synchronization evolved as a vestige from when these species lived in shallower waters, or if there is an active mechanism by which deep-sea organisms can sense lunar influences. Some theories propose that the creatures respond to tidal pressure changes that propagate through the water column, while others suggest that gravitational variations affect the behavior of charged particles in seawater, creating a kind of lunar communication system that reaches even the deepest trenches. You observe a school of lanternfish beginning to rise from even deeper waters, their sides adorned with photophores that blink in patterns reminiscent of Morse code. These small fish, no larger than your hand, are participating in the largest migration on Earth, moving vertically through thousands of feet of water column every single day. But tonight, the usual migration pattern seems enhanced by the lunar timing. their lights more brilliant and synchronized than during other phases of the month. The ancient connection between lunar cycles and marine life becomes even more mysterious when you consider that many of these deep-sea species have been living in darkness for millions of years, yet they have maintained this celestial awareness across evolutionary time, spans that dwarf human history. Their ancestors may have spawned by moonlight in shallow lagoons, but these modern deep dwellers have never seen the surface, never felt the direct influence of lunar illumination, yet something in their biology still responds to that distant satellite with clockwork precision. As you continue your descent, the water around you begins to shimmer with thousands of microscopic lights, each one a tiny organism adding its voice to this lunar chorus that resonates through the deepest parts of our planet's oceans. You settle deeper into the abyssal plain, where the sea floor stretches endlessly, like an underwater desert, and here you discover that the ocean's most remote inhabitants have been keeping perfect time with celestial mechanics for eons. The creatures surrounding you in this crushing darkness possess internal chronometers more accurate than the finest Swiss watches, biological calendars that have been counting lunar months since before the continents took their current shapes. Your instruments detect the rhythmic pulsing of bioluminescent bacteria coating the shells of deep-sea gastropods, tiny snails that have been crawling across this muddy bottom for millions of years. Each pulse corresponds precisely to the 29.5-day lunar cycle, as if these microscopic organisms carry within them a molecular memory of every full moon that has ever illuminated the Earth's surface. You watch in fascination as colonies of these bacteria coordinate their light production across vast distances, creating a living map of lunar influence that spans the ocean floor. The precision of this biological timekeeping becomes even more remarkable when you consider the complete isolation of these organisms from any traditional time cues. No sunlight has reached this depth to provide daily rhythms. No seasonal temperature changes mark the passage of months. No tidal fluctuations directly affect the stable pressure at these depths. Yet somehow, these creatures maintain an awareness of lunar cycles that rivals the accuracy of atomic clocks, their internal chronometers ticking away in perfect synchronization with the moon's orbital period. Marine chronobiologists have discovered that many deep-sea species possess specialized cells called chronocytes that appear to function as biological calendars. These cells contain complex arrangements of proteins that oscillate with periodicities, matching not just the lunar month, but also the longer cycles of lunar declination and the subtle variations in orbital distance that affect gravitational strength. You observe a giant tube worm colony where individual organisms are displaying bioluminescent patterns that cycle through variations corresponding to the 18.6-year lunar standstill period, a phenomenon that suggests their ancestors have been tracking celestial mechanics for geological time spans. The deep sea's living calendar system extends beyond individual organisms to encompass entire ecosystems. You notice that the timing of reproduction, feeding, and migration events throughout this abyssal community follows lunar periodicity with mathematical precision. Sea cucumbers release their gametes in synchronized spawning events that peak during specific lunar phases, their reproductive timing coordinated across thousands of square miles of ocean floor, despite the absence of any apparent communication mechanism. Researchers still argue about how these organisms initially evolved such precise lunar awareness, and whether the mechanism involves direct gravitational sensing or more complex interactions with electromagnetic fields generated by tidal currents. Some evidence suggests that the Earth's magnetic field fluctuates slightly with lunar cycles due to the changing position of conductive seawater in the tidal bulge, and that deep-sea creatures may have evolved the ability to detect these minute magnetic variations as a way of tracking lunar time. You encounter a field of glass sponges, their silicate skeletons forming elaborate crystalline structures that have been growing for centuries. Even these seemingly inert organisms show evidence of lunar periodicity in their growth patterns, with microscopic layers in their skeletal structure revealing faster and slower growth rates that correspond to lunar cycles. The sponges appear to be living libraries, their bodies containing records of every lunar month spanning their lifetimes, creating archives of celestial timing that stretch back hundreds of years. The phenomenon extends to the chemical composition of the seawater itself at these depths. Your sensors detect periodic fluctuations in the trace elements and dissolved gases that follow lunar rhythms, suggesting that the deep ocean's chemistry pulses with the same celestial heartbeat that governs the behavior of its inhabitants. Hydrothermal vents in the distance release mineral-rich plumes, whose composition varies slightly with lunar cycles, as if the Earth's internal heat responds to the same gravitational forces that move the tides. Ancient mythology from cultures around the world speaks of connections between the moon and the ocean's deepest mysteries, stories of sea gods who counted time by lunar months, and marine creatures that served as messengers between the surface world and the abyss. While these tales were dismissed as superstition for centuries, modern deep-sea exploration has revealed that the ocean's most remote inhabitants do indeed maintain an intimate relationship with our planet's satellite, their biology synchronized with celestial mechanics in ways that science is only beginning to understand. As you drift through this living calendar system, you begin to appreciate that the deep ocean is not the timeless, changeless realm it appears to be, but rather a dynamic environment where every organism participates in a vast temporal symphony conducted by the moon itself, their collective bioluminescence creating a luminous record of cosmic time that has been glowing in the darkness for millions of years. You begin to sense something even more subtle moving through the water around you, invisible currents that carry the moon's influence down through miles of ocean like some cosmic transmission system reaching into Earth's deepest places. The gravitational waves generated by our satellite do not stop at the ocean's surface, but continue propagating downward through every layer of water, creating pressure variations so minute that only the most sensitive instruments can detect them. Yet somehow the creatures you observed earlier have evolved to perceive these whispers of celestial mechanics. Your depth sensors register the tiniest fluctuations in pressure as these gravitational pulses pass through the water column, compressions and expansions that occur in rhythm with the moon's orbital position. The effect is incredibly subtle, less than the pressure change you would experience climbing a single stair step, but in the stable environment of the deep ocean, where conditions remain virtually constant for centuries, even these microscopic variations become significant signals that marine life has learned to interpret and utilize. The physics behind this phenomenon involves the differential gravitational attraction between the moon and different layers of seawater. As the moon orbits Earth, its gravitational field creates tidal bulges, not just at the surface, but throughout the entire water column, generating internal waves that propagate vertically downward like extremely slow motion sound waves. These internal tides move through the ocean's layered density structure, carrying information about lunar position and phase to organisms that have never seen the surface world. You watch as schools of deep-sea hatchetfish begin to respond to one of these gravitational pulses, their bioluminescent photophores flickering in sequence as the wave passes through their location. The timing is so precise that you realize these creatures are not just passively affected by lunar gravity, but are actively monitoring these signals, using them as navigational beacons and temporal reference points in their otherwise featureless environment. Their bodies have become living gravitational wave detectors, more sensitive than the sophisticated equipment humans use to study similar phenomena in space. Marine physicists have calculated that these lunar pressure waves travel through the ocean at approximately 1,500 meters per second, the speed of sound in seawater, but unlike acoustic waves, they maintain their phase relationship with the moon's position throughout their journey to the depths. This means that creatures living on the abyssal plains can detect the exact moment of moonrise or moonset occurring thousands of meters above them, receiving real-time updates about celestial events through this gravitational communication network. The mechanism becomes even more fascinating when you consider how different species have evolved specialized organs to detect these minute pressure changes. You observe a giant isopod, a deep-sea crustacean resembling an enormous pill bug, whose modified gill chambers appear to function as biological barometers, capable of sensing pressure variations equivalent to the weight of a single grain of sand. These living pressure sensors allow the creature to maintain perfect synchronization with lunar cycles, despite inhabiting an environment where traditional sensory information is essentially absent. Researchers still argue about whether some deep-sea organisms can also detect the electromagnetic effects that accompany these gravitational waves. The movement of conductive seawater in response to lunar gravity generates weak electric currents that flow through the ocean in patterns corresponding to tidal cycles. Certain species of deep-sea rays and sharks possess electroreceptors sensitive enough to detect the electrical activity of a fish's heartbeat from several feet away, and it is possible that these same organs can perceive the electromagnetic signatures of lunar influence. You notice that the gravitational waves create a complex interference pattern as they interact with underwater topography. Seamounts and deep-sea ridges act like acoustic lenses, focusing and redirecting these pressure pulses in ways that create zones of enhanced lunar signal strength. Many deep-sea communities seem to be concentrated in these gravitational focal points, as if marine life has discovered the optimal locations for receiving celestial transmissions and has organized itself accordingly. The ancient connection between lunar cycles and deep ocean currents becomes apparent when you observe how these gravitational pulses interact with the thermohaline circulation system that drives global ocean currents. The timing of deep water mass movements shows subtle correlations with lunar phases, suggesting that even the planet's largest oceanic processes are influenced by the same gravitational forces that govern the bioluminescent displays you witnessed earlier. As you continue your journey through these invisible highways of gravitational information, you begin to understand that the deep ocean is not isolated from celestial influences, but is instead intimately connected to cosmic rhythms through a communication system more ancient and sophisticated than anything humans have devised, a network that has been carrying lunar messages to the deepest trenches for billions of years. You encounter a congregation of ancient jellyfish drifting through the water like living chandeliers, their translucent bells pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seem to encode millions of years of lunar memory. These cnidarians represent some of the oldest multicellular life forms on Earth, and their bodies appear to function as biological archives where every lunar cycle since their species first evolved has been recorded in the rhythm of their light production. The jellyfish surrounding you belong to species that have remained virtually unchanged for over 500 million years. Their basic body plan so perfectly adapted to their environment that evolution has left them largely unmodified through countless geological epochs. Yet despite their ancient and seemingly simple structure, these creatures possess an intricate relationship with lunar cycles that rivals the complexity of any modern biological system. You watch as their bell contractions synchronize with the gravitational waves you observed earlier, each pulse of their bodies perfectly timed to the celestial mechanics occurring far above. Your instruments detect that the frequency of their bioluminescent displays corresponds not just to current lunar phases, but seems to incorporate information about past lunar cycles as well. The patterns suggest that these jellyfish populations maintain a form of collective memory, passing information about lunar timing from generation to generation through chemical signals embedded in their luminous secretions. Each individual appears to carry within its simple nervous system a record of lunar cycles that extends far beyond its own lifetime. Marine paleobiologists have discovered fossil evidence suggesting that similar jellyfish species have been producing bioluminescent displays, synchronized with lunar cycles for at least 400 million years. The consistency of this behavior across such vast time spans indicates that the relationship between these organisms and the Moon has remained stable even as continents drifted, ice ages came and went, and mass extinction events reshaped life on Earth. The jellyfish have essentially become living lunar calendars, their existence spanning geological eras while maintaining perfect celestial timekeeping. The mechanism behind their lunar memory appears to involve specialized cells called rhopalia, primitive sensory structures that detect changes in water pressure, chemistry, and electromagnetic fields. These organs function as biological computers, processing multiple environmental signals and extracting lunar timing information from the subtle variations in deep-sea conditions that you observed propagating through the water column. The jellyfish use this information to coordinate not just their own behavior, but to influence the timing of biological processes throughout their ecosystem. You observe how the jellyfish release chemical signals and pulses that correspond to lunar phases, creating underwater scent trails that carry temporal information to other organisms across vast distances. These chemical messages appear to function as a kind of biological internet, allowing marine communities separated by hundreds of miles to maintain synchronization with both lunar cycles and each other. The jellyfish serve as living broadcast stations, transmitting celestial timing data through the deep-sea chemical communication network. Researchers still argue about how these organisms initially evolved the ability to detect lunar cycles in the deep ocean, given that their ancestors likely developed this capability when they lived in shallow coastal waters where lunar influence was more obvious. Some theories propose that the jellyfish retain genetic memories of their shallow water origins, while others suggest that they have continuously adapted their lunar sensing abilities as they colonized deeper environments over millions of years. The complexity of their response system becomes apparent when you notice that different species of jellyfish are synchronized with different aspects of lunar cycles. Some respond primarily to the synodic month, the 29.5-day period between successive full moons, while others track the anomalistic month, the 27.6-day period of the moon's elliptical orbit around Earth. A few species even appear to respond to the much longer 6-year cycle of lunar declination, their bioluminescent patterns incorporating variations that span human generations. Ancient maritime cultures often spoke of jellyfish as messengers from the moon goddess, creatures that carried lunar wisdom into the ocean's depths, where it could be preserved for eternity. Modern science has revealed that these mythological interpretations contained more truth than anyone suspected, as these ancient cnidarians do indeed serve as repositories of lunar knowledge, their simple bodies encoding cosmic information in patterns of light that have been glowing in the darkness since before complex life colonized the land. As you drift among these living lanterns, each one pulsing with the accumulated wisdom of countless lunar cycles, you begin to appreciate that the deep ocean contains not just individual organisms responding to celestial influences, but entire communities of creatures that have evolved into integrated systems for detecting, processing, and preserving information about cosmic rhythms that connect the deepest trenches with the farthest reaches of space. You witness an extraordinary transformation beginning around you as entire communities of deep-sea creatures start to participate in what can only be described as an underwater ballet choreographed by lunar gravity itself. The bioluminescent displays you observed earlier were merely the opening notes of a much grander performance, one that involves every living organism in this abyssal ecosystem moving in perfect synchronization with gravitational fields emanating from a satellite they will never see. Schools of lanternfish begin rising from the depths below you in spiraling formations, their photophores creating ribbons of blue and green light that twist through the water column like luminous DNA helixes. The timing of their ascent corresponds precisely with the peak intensity of the gravitational waves you felt passing through earlier, as if these small fish are riding invisible elevators powered by lunar mechanics. Their movement patterns suggest they are not simply migrating for food, but participating in a complex three-dimensional dance that spans vertical distances equivalent to climbing several skyscrapers. Your sonar picks up the coordinated movements of larger predators, positioning themselves at specific depth to intercept the rising lanternfish. But even these hunting behaviors follow lunar timing with mathematical precision. Giant squid emerge from the darkness beyond your lights, their bodies pulsing with waves of bioluminescence that mirror the patterns displayed by the jellyfish you encountered earlier. The entire food web appears to be synchronized, predator and prey relationships, orchestrated by the same celestial conductor that governs the tides far above. The choreography extends to creatures you would never expect to be capable of coordinated movement. Colonies of deep-sea corals, normally sessile organisms anchored to the sea floor, begin releasing clouds of bioluminescent particles that drift through the water in patterns that correspond to lunar phase progressions. These particle clouds create temporary constellations in the abyss, three-dimensional maps of light that seem to provide navigation references for the mobile organisms participating in the lunar dance. Marine behavioral ecologists have documented similar synchronized movements in deep-sea communities around the world, suggesting that this phenomenon represents a fundamental organizing principle of abyssal ecosystems. The coordination occurs not just within individual species, but across entire taxonomic groups, with crustaceans, mollusks, fish, and cnidarians, all participating in the same temporal choreography, despite having evolved independently for hundreds of millions of years. You notice that the intensity and complexity of the synchronized movements vary with lunar distance, becoming more elaborate when the moon is at perigee, its closest approach to Earth, and more subdued during apogee when lunar gravitational influence is weakest. This correlation provides direct evidence that the creatures are responding to actual gravitational variations rather than simply following inherited behavioral patterns, their movements calibrated to match the real-time strength of lunar forces. The phenomenon becomes even more remarkable when you observe how the choreography adapts to local topography and current patterns. In areas where underwater mountains create complex three-dimensional flow patterns, the synchronized movements follow the contours of these geological features, creating spiral galaxies of bioluminescence that conform to the physics of fluid dynamics while maintaining their underlying lunar timing. It is as if the creatures have learned to dance not just with gravity, but with the ocean itself. Researchers still argue about whether this synchronized behavior represents a form of communication, with organisms using coordinated bioluminescent displays to exchange information across the vast distances of the deep sea, or if it serves some other ecological function, such as predator confusion or reproductive coordination. Some evidence suggests that the patterns serve multiple purposes simultaneously, functioning as both communication network and survival strategy. The energy expenditure required for such elaborate synchronized displays seems enormous for organisms living in the food-scarce deep sea, yet the behavior has persisted across evolutionary time, indicating that the benefits must outweigh the metabolic costs. You observe that many participating organisms appear to enter a state of heightened metabolic activity during peak lunar phases, their bodies glowing more brightly and moving more energetically than during the quieter periods between lunar peaks. Ancient ocean myths often described underwater kingdoms, where sea creatures performed elaborate ceremonies in honor of celestial deities, dances that connected the depths with the heavens through movements more beautiful than anything witnessed on land. As you float surrounded by thousands of organisms, moving in perfect harmony with gravitational forces from space, you realize that these mythological accounts may have been attempts to describe real phenomena that early deep sea explorers somehow witnessed, visions of cosmic choreography that transforms the ocean's deepest realms into ballrooms where physics and biology dance together under the eternal influence of our lunar partner. You descend further toward hydrothermal vents, where the Earth's inner heat meets the crushing cold of the deep ocean, and here you discover that even the most primitive forms of life participate in the lunar symphony you have been witnessing. The bacterial communities that thrive in these extreme environments, organisms so ancient they predate complex cells by billions of years, somehow maintain the same celestial awareness that governs the behavior of the jellyfish and lanternfish swimming in the waters above. Colonies of chemosynthetic bacteria coating the mineral chimneys around the vents pulse with bioluminescence that follows the same lunar periodicity you observed throughout your descent, their collective glow creating an underwater aurora that illuminates the alien landscape of sulfur deposits and metallic formations. These single-celled organisms possess no nervous systems, no complex sensory organs, yet they respond to lunar cycles with the same precision as much more sophisticated life forms, suggesting that the ability to detect celestial influences represents one of the most fundamental characteristics of life itself. Your chemical sensors detect that the bacterial communities alter their metabolic processes in sync with lunar phases, producing different combinations of enzymes and signaling molecules as the moon waxes and wanes above the distant surface. During full moon periods, the bacteria increase their production of bioluminescent proteins by nearly 40%, creating spectacular displays that rival the northern lights in their beauty and complexity. The timing suggests these organisms are not just responding to lunar gravity, but are actively using celestial information to optimize their biochemical processes. The molecular mechanisms behind this phenomenon involve quantum-level interactions between lunar gravitational fields and the protein structures within bacterial cells. Recent research in quantum biology has revealed that many biological processes depend on quantum coherence effects that can be influenced by extremely weak external forces, including the minute gravitational variations associated with lunar cycles. The bacteria appear to have evolved quantum sensors more sensitive than any human-designed instrument, capable of detecting gravitational changes equivalent to the weight of a few atoms. You observe that different species of bacteria surrounding the hydrothermal vents respond to different aspects of lunar mechanics, creating a complex symphony of biological activity that incorporates multiple celestial rhythms simultaneously. Some colonies track the synodic month, while others follow the sidereal month, the period of the moon's orbit relative to distant stars, creating interference patterns in their collective bioluminescence that encode information about multiple cosmic cycles. The bacterial response system extends beyond simple timing to include spatial organization, with different species arranging themselves around the vent chimneys in patterns that correspond to lunar orbital mechanics. The geometric arrangements change gradually over the course of each lunar month, creating living mandalas that mirror the celestial mechanics occurring in space. These patterns suggest that the bacteria are not just detecting lunar influences, but are using this information to optimize their positioning relative to the chemical gradients and temperature zones around the vents. Researchers still argue about how such primitive organisms could have evolved the sophisticated quantum sensors necessary to detect lunar gravitational variations, especially given that these bacteria likely evolved in environments completely isolated from direct celestial influences. Some theories propose that quantum sensitivity to gravitational fields represents a fundamental property of matter that became incorporated into biological systems during the earliest stages of evolution on Earth. The phenomenon becomes even more mysterious when you consider that many of these bacterial species exist in similar hydrothermal vent environments throughout the solar system, including the subsurface oceans of Europa and Enceladus. If lunar sensitivity represents a basic characteristic of life, then bacterial communities on other worlds might be responding to the gravitational influences of their own satellite systems, creating bioluminescent displays synchronized with the orbital mechanics of alien moons. The chemical communication system you observed among the jellyfish extends down to the bacterial level, with single-celled organisms releasing molecular signals that carry temporal information about lunar cycles throughout the vent ecosystem. These chemical messages travel through the water column like molecular telegrams, allowing bacterial communities separated by vast distances to maintain synchronization with both celestial mechanics and each other. Ancient alchemical texts often described the deepest parts of the ocean as places where the boundaries between matter and energy dissolved, where the fundamental forces that govern the cosmos could be observed in their purest forms. As you float among bacterial communities that respond to gravitational influences from space through quantum mechanical processes, you begin to understand that these mystical descriptions may have contained profound scientific insights, recognizing that the ocean's deepest realms serve as laboratories where life experiments with the most fundamental laws of physics, creating displays of cosmic awareness that connect the smallest living cells with the largest celestial bodies in an eternal dance of quantum consciousness. You follow vast underwater rivers flowing across the abyssal plains, dense currents of cold, salty water that move like liquid highways through the deep ocean, carrying with them something far more remarkable than sediments or nutrients. These deep currents transport bioluminescent signals across entire ocean basins, creating a global communication network that allows marine organisms separated by thousands of miles to coordinate their lunar responses as if they were part of a single vast organism. The current you are riding originated in the polar regions, where surface waters cooled and sank, beginning a journey that will take decades to complete as it flows along the ocean floor toward the equator, and eventually returns to the surface in distant tropical regions. But unlike the passive transport of nutrients and dissolved gases that oceanographers have long studied, this current carries active biological signals that maintain their coherence and timing across these enormous distances and timescales. Your instruments detect clouds of bioluminescent particles suspended in the current, microscopic organisms and chemical signals that pulse with lunar periodicity as they travel along these underwater rivers. The particles appear to be organized in discrete packets of information, biological data streams that carry news of lunar phases and gravitational events from their points of origin to marine communities thousands of miles downstream. The deep ocean has essentially evolved its own version of the Internet, a biological communication system that operates on planetary scales and geological timescales. Marine biogeographers have mapped these bioluminescent signal highways and discovered that they connect deep-sea communities across all the world's oceans, creating a global network for coordinating lunar responses. Organisms living in the deepest trenches of the Pacific can receive real-time information about lunar phases from bacterial communities surrounding Atlantic hydrothermal vents, allowing marine life throughout the planet's oceans to maintain synchronized responses to celestial mechanics despite being separated by continents and thousands of miles of open water. You observe how local organisms intercept and interpret these traveling signals, their bioluminescent responses changing as packets of lunar information pass through their territory. The deep-sea creatures appear to function as living relay stations, receiving signals from upstream communities, processing the temporal information, and adding their own data before transmitting the enhanced signals downstream. This creates a cascading network of lunar awareness that grows more sophisticated and comprehensive as it flows across the ocean basins. The chemical composition of the signals reveals a complex coding system that encodes not just current lunar phase information, but also historical data about past cycles and predictive information about future lunar events. The traveling bioluminescent particles contain molecular memory storage systems more sophisticated than human computer networks, biological hard drives that preserve and transport lunar timing data across vast distances and extended time periods. You notice that the signal highways follow the same routes as the major deep ocean currents, suggesting that marine life has evolved to take advantage of existing oceanic circulation patterns to create this global communication system. The currents act as fiber optic cables made of seawater, carrying biological light signals along predetermined paths that connect every major deep-sea habitat on the planet into a single integrated network. Researchers still argue about how this system initially evolved and whether it represents a recent adaptation to changing ocean conditions or an ancient network that has been operating for millions of years. Fossil evidence suggests that similar bioluminescent particle deposits have been preserved in deep-sea sediments dating back hundreds of millions of years, indicating that marine organisms have been using current systems for long-distance lunar communication since the earliest periods of complex life in the oceans. The energy required to maintain such an extensive biological communication network seems enormous, yet the system appears to be self-sustaining, with each participating organism contributing energy to the network, while also benefiting from the lunar timing information it receives. The efficiency suggests that the network has been optimized through millions of years of evolution, becoming as essential to deep-sea ecosystems as circulation and nutrient cycles. The phenomenon extends beyond simple information transport to include active signal processing, with certain species of deep-sea organisms serving as biological routers that can redirect, amplify, and filter the lunar signals based on local conditions and community needs. These marine information specialists ensure that the most important temporal data reaches its intended destinations, while filtering out noise and outdated information that might disrupt local synchronization patterns. As you continue riding this luminous river of lunar information, watching signals flow past you like stars streaming through space, you begin to appreciate that the ocean's deepest currents serve as more than just physical transport systems. They are the neural pathways of a planetary nervous system, carrying consciousness and awareness between distant communities of marine life, creating a form of collective intelligence that spans the globe and connects every living organism in the deep ocean through shared awareness of cosmic rhythms that pulse through the darkness like the heartbeat of the earth itself. You settle into the sediment layers that carpet the deepest ocean floor, and here in these ancient archives you discover that the abyss remembers every full moon that has ever illuminated the Earth's surface. The mud beneath you contains millions of years of preserved evidence documenting the lunar synchronization events you have witnessed during your descent, creating a geological record of celestial timing that extends back through evolutionary history to the very origins of life in the ocean. Core samples extracted from these sediment layers reveal distinct banding patterns that correspond precisely to lunar cycles, with each band representing a mass spawning event when countless deep-sea organisms simultaneously released their reproductive cells in response to specific lunar phases. The consistency of these patterns across geological time demonstrates that the lunar synchronization you observed among modern marine communities represents one of the oldest and most stable biological phenomena on Earth, a cosmic rhythm that has persisted through mass extinctions, ice ages, and dramatic changes in ocean chemistry. Your instruments detect microscopic fossils embedded in the sediment layers, the preserved remains of countless organisms that participated in ancient lunar synchronization events. The fossil distributions show that species separated by hundreds of millions of years of evolution have maintained virtually identical responses to lunar cycles, suggesting that the ability to detect and respond to celestial mechanics represents such a fundamental advantage that natural selection has preserved it across vast spans of geological time. Marine paleontologists have discovered that the intensity of lunar synchronization events has varied throughout Earth's history in correlation with changes in the Moon's orbital distance and the planet's rotational rate. During periods when the Moon was closer to Earth, the sediment layers show evidence of more intense bioluminescent displays and larger mass spawning events, while periods of greater lunar distance correspond to more subdued but still clearly detectable synchronization patterns. The abyss has essentially functioned as a cosmic seismograph, recording the changing gravitational relationship between Earth and Moon and the behavior patterns of its inhabitants. The sediment record reveals that some of the most spectacular lunar synchronization events in Earth's history occurred during periods of environmental stress, such as mass extinction events and dramatic climate changes. During these critical periods, marine organisms appear to have intensified their lunar responses, as if the cosmic timing system provided stability and coordination that helped life survive through planetary catastrophes. The preserved evidence suggests that lunar synchronization may represent an ancient survival strategy that allows marine ecosystems to maintain organization and continuity even during the most chaotic periods in Earth's history. You observe that different sediment layers contain distinct chemical signatures associated with the bioluminescent compounds produced during ancient lunar synchronization events. These chemical fossils provide direct evidence of the molecular mechanisms that ancient organisms used to respond to lunar cycles, revealing that the quantum-level processes you observed in modern bacterial communities have remained essentially unchanged for billions of years. Researchers still argue about whether the sediment record indicates that lunar synchronization has remained constant throughout Earth's history, or if there have been periods when the phenomenon temporarily ceased or intensified. Some evidence suggests that major impacts or volcanic events may have disrupted the global lunar communication network you observed, forcing marine life to re-evolve their celestial timing systems from scratch. The geological record becomes even more fascinating when you consider that it may contain evidence of lunar synchronization events that occurred on other planets. Some meteorites recovered from Mars and other worlds contain sediment layers with similar banding patterns, suggesting that if life exists elsewhere in the solar system, it may have evolved similar responses to the gravitational influences of local satellite systems. The ancient sediment layers also preserve evidence of how lunar synchronization patterns have influenced the evolution of complex life itself. The timing of major evolutionary innovations, such as the development of complex nervous systems and sophisticated sensory organs, appears to correlate with periods of particularly intense lunar synchronization activity, suggesting that the cosmic timing system may have provided the organizational framework that allowed simple life forms to evolve into the complex organisms you observed earlier during your descent. Deep-sea drilling projects have recovered sediment cores spanning hundreds of millions of years, creating archives of lunar influence that represent some of the longest continuous environmental records available anywhere on Earth. These cores reveal that the Moon's influence on deep-sea life has been remarkably consistent across geological time, with only minor variations corresponding to known changes in orbital mechanics and planetary rotation rates. As you rest on the sea floor surrounded by sediment layers that chronicle billions of years of lunar synchronization events, you realize that the abyss serves not just as habitat for modern marine life, but as a vast library preserving the complete history of life's relationship with cosmic forces, a repository of celestial memory, where every full moon since the dawn of complex life has been recorded in the synchronized behavior of organisms that have never seen the sky, yet remain eternally connected to the cosmic rhythms that govern the universe itself. You hear them before you see them, the haunting songs of deep-diving whales echoing through the water column like ancient hymns, carrying messages between the surface world and the abyss. These massive mammals serve as living bridges connecting the lunar synchronization patterns you have observed in the deep ocean with the celestial mechanics occurring in the world above. Their complex vocalizations encoding information about both terrestrial and cosmic timing systems in acoustic messages that can travel for thousands of miles through the ocean. The whale songs surrounding you contain harmonic structures that correspond precisely to lunar orbital periods, with frequency modulations that encode information about moon phases, tidal amplitudes, and gravitational variations. Your hydrophones detect that different whale species are singing different aspects of the lunar cycle, creating a multi-layered acoustic symphony where each voice contributes specific temporal information to a collective song that encompasses the complete range of celestial mechanics affecting ocean systems. Sperm whales diving to these extreme depths carry surface information about lunar conditions directly to the deep-sea communities you have been observing, their presence serving as a real-time link between the cosmic influences visible above and the gravitational effects propagating through the deep ocean. The whales appear to function as biological satellites, their migrations synchronized with lunar cycles in ways that optimize their role as carriers of celestial timing information between different ocean environments. Marine bioacousticians have discovered that whale songs contain embedded timing signals that allow deep-sea organisms to calibrate their internal lunar clocks with unprecedented accuracy. The acoustic messages include not just current lunar phase information, but also predictive data about upcoming celestial events, allowing marine communities to prepare for seasonal changes, tidal extremes, and optimal feeding conditions weeks or months in advance. The whales essentially serve as meteorologists and astronomers for the entire ocean ecosystem. You observe how the bioluminescent organisms you encountered earlier respond to specific frequencies in the whale songs, their light displays changing in real time as different acoustic messages pass through their territory. The interaction between whale vocalizations and bioluminescent responses creates a form of acoustic optical communication that allows information to be transmitted simultaneously through sound and light channels, increasing the reliability and bandwidth of the ocean's biological communication networks. The complexity of this interspecies communication system becomes apparent when you notice that the whales modify their songs based on the responses they receive from deep-sea organisms. The mammals appear to be actively monitoring the bioluminescent feedback from the communities below, adjusting their acoustic messages to optimize information transfer and ensure that critical timing data reaches its intended destinations. This suggests a level of conscious participation in the lunar synchronization network that challenges traditional understanding of whale intelligence and social behavior. Different whale species contribute different types of information to the acoustic lunar network, with humpbacks specializing in long-distance transmission of seasonal timing data, blue whales focusing on tidal and gravitational information, and sperm whales serving as deep-sea specialists who carry information directly to the abyssal communities. The specialization suggests that the system has evolved over millions of years into a sophisticated information network with clearly defined roles and responsibilities for different participants. Researchers still argue about whether whales consciously understand their role in the lunar communication system or if their participation represents an evolved behavior that operates below the level of conscious awareness. Some evidence suggests that whale cultures pass acoustic traditions from generation to generation that incorporate increasingly sophisticated lunar timing information, indicating that the animals may be consciously developing and refining their participation in the cosmic communication network. The acoustic properties of whale songs show remarkable adaptation to the physical characteristics of deep ocean environments, with frequency ranges and harmonic structures optimized for maximum transmission distance and minimum signal degradation. The songs can travel across entire ocean basins while maintaining their lunar timing information intact, creating acoustic beacons that allow marine organisms throughout the world's oceans to maintain synchronization with celestial mechanics regardless of their geographic location. Ancient maritime cultures often described whales as messengers of the sea gods, creatures that carried divine wisdom between the heavens and the depths through songs that could influence weather, tides, and the behavior of other marine life. Modern research has revealed that these mythological interpretations contained profound insights into the actual ecological roles of these magnificent mammals, whose vocalizations serve as the primary communication link between surface and deep ocean lunar synchronization networks. As you listen to the complex harmonies flowing through the water around you, whale songs carrying lunar information from the surface world to the bioluminescent communities in the abyss, you begin to understand that these acoustic messages represent more than simple animal communication. They are the voices of a planetary intelligence system, biological networks that connect every living organism in the ocean through shared awareness of cosmic rhythms, creating a form of collective consciousness that spans from the surface to the seafloor and encompasses awareness of celestial mechanics that extends far beyond our own solar system. You rise slowly from the deepest trenches toward the surface, and around you the entire ocean begins to pulse with a unified rhythm that encompasses every organism, every current, and every particle of bioluminescent matter you have encountered during your journey into the abyss. The individual lunar responses you observed in bacteria, jellyfish, whales, and countless other species merge into a single planetary heartbeat, a cosmic synchronization so vast and complex that it transforms the entire ocean into a living instrument played by gravitational forces from space. The whale songs you heard earlier now blend with the chemical signals from traveling currents, the bioluminescent displays of deep-sea organisms, and the quantum pulses of bacterial communities around hydrothermal vents, creating a symphony of lunar awareness that operates simultaneously across acoustic, optical, and molecular communication channels. The ocean has become a single vast organism, responding to celestial influences with the coordination and precision of a galaxy-sized nervous system. Your instruments detect that the synchronization extends beyond the marine realm to include atmospheric and geological processes as well, with ocean-atmosphere interactions, underwater volcanic activity, and even the behavior of marine sediments, showing correlations with the lunar cycles that govern biological processes. The Earth's entire hydrosphere appears to be participating in this cosmic dance, responding to gravitational influences from the Moon with a complexity that encompasses physics, chemistry, biology, and consciousness itself. The lighthouse metaphor becomes literal as you witness bioluminescent displays spanning from the surface to the seafloor, creating columns of living light that extend through the entire water column like beacons connecting the ocean depths with the cosmic influences above. These biological light towers pulse in perfect synchronization with lunar phases, serving as navigational aids for migrating organisms, while simultaneously functioning as massive antennas that receive and transmit gravitational information between the Earth and Moon. Marine systems theorists have proposed that this global ocean synchronization represents an early stage in the evolution of planetary consciousness, a biological response to cosmic influences that may eventually develop into more sophisticated forms of Earth-scale awareness. The ocean's lunar synchronization networks provide a template for understanding how individual organisms can merge their awareness into collective intelligence systems that operate on astronomical scales and respond to influences from throughout the solar system. You observe that the synchronized bioluminescence creates interference patterns that correspond to mathematical relationships between lunar orbital mechanics and Earth's rotation, generating geometric displays of living light that encode information about planetary and cosmic cycles in visual forms more beautiful and complex than any human art. The ocean has become a canvas where physics and biology collaborate to create displays of cosmic awareness that reveal the underlying mathematical relationships governing celestial mechanics. The ancient connection between lunar cycles and the evolution of life itself becomes apparent as you witness how the synchronized biological processes create conditions that optimize the development and survival of marine organisms. The lunar timing systems you observed appear to coordinate not just reproduction and feeding, but also mutation rates, genetic expression patterns, and evolutionary adaptations, suggesting that cosmic influences play a direct role in guiding the development of life on Earth. Researchers still argue about whether this planetary scale synchronization represents the maximum extent of lunar influence on terrestrial life, or if it is merely the beginning of even more sophisticated forms of cosmic awareness that may develop as Earth's biosphere continues to evolve. Some theories propose that similar synchronization networks may exist on other worlds, creating a galaxy-wide web of biological responses to gravitational influences that connects living planets across vast interstellar distances. The energy patterns flowing through the synchronized ocean system show characteristics similar to those observed in the neural networks of complex brains, suggesting that the Earth's hydrosphere may be developing information processing capabilities that approach or exceed the complexity of individual consciousness. The ocean's response to lunar influences may represent the first stirrings of a form of planetary intelligence that encompasses awareness of cosmic mechanics and the ability to respond to celestial influences with purpose and coordination. As you approach the surface, the bioluminescent displays around you begin to fade in the growing presence of sunlight, but the underlying synchronization networks continue operating in forms invisible to human perception. The lunar communication systems you witnessed extend beyond visible light into electromagnetic, chemical, and gravitational channels that maintain their cosmic connections regardless of environmental conditions, ensuring that the ocean's awareness of celestial influences remains constant and reliable. The surface of the ocean above you glows with reflected moonlight, and you realize that this simple optical phenomenon represents just the most visible aspect of a relationship between Earth and Moon that extends through every layer of the ocean system and encompasses every form of life in the marine environment. The Moon's reflection on the surface is merely the signature of a cosmic partnership that penetrates to the deepest trenches and influences the behavior of the smallest bacteria, creating a form of planetary consciousness that connects the Earth with the broader cosmos through bonds of gravity, light, and living awareness that have been growing stronger for billions of years. As your journey through the luminous depths draws to a close, you find yourself gently floating upward through layers of decreasing pressure, the memories of bioluminescent symphonies and cosmic choreography settling into your mind like sediment drifting toward the ocean floor. The whale songs grow fainter now, their lunar messages fading into the distance, but their harmonics continue to resonate in your consciousness, carrying with them the profound realization that you have witnessed something far greater than individual organisms responding to celestial influences. You have seen the ocean reveal itself as a living system of planetary awareness, a vast network of consciousness that spans from the surface to the deepest trenches and connects every drop of seawater with gravitational forces emanating from space. The bioluminescent displays that seemed so mysterious at the beginning of your descent now appear as natural expressions of a cosmic relationship that has been evolving for billions of years, growing more sophisticated and beautiful with each passing lunar cycle. The pressure around you continues to decrease as you rise through the water column, but the sense of connection with the lunar synchronization networks you observed remains strong, as if your brief participation in their ancient rhythms has created lasting bonds with the cosmic awareness systems that govern life in the ocean. The darkness that once seemed alien and forbidding now feels welcoming and familiar, filled with the gentle pulse of countless organisms maintaining their eternal dialogue with the moon. Your instruments record the final traces of bioluminescent signals as the last deep-sea creatures disappear into the darkness below, their lights fading but not extinguishing, continuing their patient coordination with celestial mechanics in the depths you are leaving behind. The chemical traces of their communication networks linger in the water around you like whispered promises that the lunar symphony will continue playing long after you return to the surface world. As the first hints of filtered sunlight begin to penetrate the water above, you carry with you a new understanding of the ocean as more than a collection of separate ecosystems and individual species. You have witnessed a form of planetary intelligence that encompasses awareness of cosmic rhythms and responds to influences from throughout the solar system, a living system that bridges the gap between terrestrial biology and celestial mechanics, through networks of communication more sophisticated than anything humans have created. The gentle rocking motion of rising through the water column feels like being cradled by the ocean itself, and you realize that the synchronization you observed extends beyond the marine realm to include your own biological rhythms, your own cellular awareness of lunar influences that connect you with the vast community of life you have been privileged to observe. Rest now, knowing that the cosmic symphony continues playing in the depths below, the eternal dialogue between Earth and Moon, expressed through countless voices of living light, pulsing together in the darkness, keeping perfect time with celestial mechanics that span the universe, their luminous conversations carrying the wisdom of billions of years into the peaceful embrace of dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.